And we're recording. Hello, hello, hello. I have announcements today, lots of them. But first things first, let us say we reached 100 subscribers. I don't know, man. That's kind of cute. It went from 84 to like 112 in like a day and a half. And I started checking to see which videos are the ones that kind of like triggered this. But hey, I really don't want to be directed simply by the people that are coming there. I'm trying my best to keep my notes very much unbiased by the world. Well, only by my own sense of reality. And hey, 100, it's good. It's good. Although, like just 2 weeks ago, we crossed the 300 video mark. So just a lot to look forward to, I guess. Got to reach 1,000. 1,000 videos is the goal. 1,000. Anyways, today's video, and it's amazing because like this note is one of those kind of like, what the hell is going on, bruh? So, is what do you think I'm preparing for? And let me tell you the story about this. So, in my journey, I started basically this whole engagement with yourself. You kind of like this whole engagement where you approach yourself and you're trying to be kinder to yourself. And you kind of like watch the triggers that happen around you and how you respond to them. And in a way, how you're trying to shift that response in a more uh, digestible way. Because most of my issues, well, most of what were my issues were the fact that I was very opinionated towards my own self. And then I realized, one day I realized that it's okay to have opinions. And I did a video on that a couple of days ago. But then any opinion you have is basically a judgment on your own reality. So effectively, anytime I had an opinion, a strong one, I'm basically making a statement and I'm judging myself harshly. I, I think at one point as well, I kind of noticed that some things that I thought I liked, I didn't like. And that kind of like triggered something bigger in me because that means that opinions change. So you either wait for them to change or you can engage with them in a way that they can change. Why the hell not? But I was sitting there and I was actually like, I think I was reading. And when you're reading, sometimes you completely, you start reading the pattern. Okay, let me try again. Sometimes when you're reading, and especially if it's something maybe heavy or like with a lot of information that you need to focus on, what happens is you continue reading normally because you're used to the words and your brain could actually like read the words, but your mind starts wandering off into a different completely like it starts discussing different things. Now that kind of for me that phenomena is very much meditative because sometimes you kind of like want to focus on something for the sake of it and you want to give your mind something to do, and when that something is happening, then your brain, you want to give your brain something to do. And when that happens, your mind kind of wanders off. And it wanders off, sorts things out. It's for me, it's the same as when you're working out. It's the same as when you're walking, running. It's the same as when you're just, I want to say, washing the dishes, cleaning the house. Just like these tasks that have become mundane because we've been doing them like a lot, these tasks kind of like draw us in and allow us to like fully flow. And so normally when that happens, and depending on what I'm reading, because sometimes I'm reading something I'm really interested in, so I stop and I go back. And sometimes if it's something informative and heavy, then I don't mind like splitting chapters and then taking a break to take notes and think about what I'm doing and all these kinds of things. So what happened is I noticed that I no longer, I was reading and then I noticed that my mind wandered off, but I kept reading because like every once in a while I come back to the book and I kind of wander off again. And I figured, man, because it's a lot of details about history and about stuff that happened. So you can always kind of build some form of storyline in your head. You don't have to know all the details, except if something kind of shows up in the book. And then you're like, oof, no, I would want to talk about this to somebody later on instead of just having the gist of it. And I started thinking about my like the platform that I'm coding every day now, and every single chance I can of thinking of this platform and like processing this platform and approaching it and just kind of like engaging with the different aspects of a startup being a startup, the identity of an entrepreneur versus the identity of a web developer versus my previous identity of a, a self, I don't know, an owner, a businessman. I don't know what the fuck people would call like just some random dude that's always intensely opening companies and trying to make them work, like brute forcing success. So it's not really an identity thing, but like your mind has to kind of like capture the aura of what you're doing in order for you to be able to target all the angles of it. And I think that's how like people split identities when it comes to like businesses, because like there's a shift between an employee and a manager, and that's the mental state where you kind of have to be able to notice things differently. And I noticed that my mind was kind of like going around that. And naturally, when things like this start happening, you start developing your anxiety, your fears, your insecurities kind of start surfacing with it. Because if you're thinking about something, that means it's not concrete. So ultimately, what happens is you kind of like start discussing the things that you're uncomfortable discussing. That's what the mind would do. The mind would always bring out the things that are not necessarily incomplete, because for it to kind of like close things out, it needs to either release something on its own, and that's the meditative state. If it's not important, it'll just pass by it, and if you don't give it attention, it just goes. And most of the time, it just fucking goes, man. Amazing, beautiful, anything, it just goes. But if it's something important, you kind of like go, huh? And when that happens, you kind of like trigger the mind to kind of like go and search for different stuff pertaining to the thing that made you go, huh? And then it just kind of like brings more stuff out for you to resolve because it's important to you. And at that point, I was like, I had completely kind of like stopped actually reading in the book and completely was just like zoning in the book, like literally like looking at the book going like this, no reading, just kind of like watching what my mind was doing. And I don't think I was doing it like, I think it became an automatic thing for me, because every once in a while, like I notice something and I ignore it. And every once in a while I notice something and I go like, nope, I take a note. So that kind of like started becoming more of a, now, because I actually put in the effort to write like physical notes, it seems I'll be able to kind of like take mental notes and kind of like continue in the conversation. So I'll have a lot more depth when I actually take a note instead of like the normal ones. And I really think the fact that I've been able to like, I've been consistently taking notes for a while has allowed me to like write better notes, know when to take the notes, reflect on the notes before I actually write it down. Like there's the processes that kind of like show up because again, it's a mundane thing. It becomes a mundane thing. At first it's hard, and then it basically like you're repeating the same thing. So you add something new for the creativity. But it's beautiful because I remember I was like, I didn't want to interfere, but as I was looking at it, I realized that there there's a lot of like resolve fear being resolved. And it's funny because like the fear was being resolved in like a rational sense. And then I lost when it came to the rational negotiation, because the what if it doesn't work, and we're taking so much time, and do you think that you're actually coming close, and do you think all these things are actually like supporting your vision? All these questions became overwhelming. And then one small voice kind of like rose, and I don't know how to explain it. It's just one of those like sensational moments, I guess. But from the depths, it stood up and it kind of like not stated, but like with a, you know, when you're speaking and you're slouching and then you raise your body when you're sitting up straight, and then you basically your voice kind of changes, and then when you're like this, your kind of voice kind of like tones down a bit because you're talking more up instead of talking more from the core. So from the core, the voice came out, and in my head, man, it literally was like it just kind of like had that aura around it, had that kind of like attitude behind it, and it literally stated, "What do you think I'm preparing for?" And for me, I was instantly kind of like, the fuck? And then suddenly everything else that was cluttering in my mind disappeared. I remember I closed the book instantly. I took my phone and I did a voice note for 7 minutes. And I was explaining to myself, I was trying to understand like how it happened and what exactly happened. And I was trying to create a more rational understanding of this emotion that was stirred by the fact that I actually was like, what do you think I'm preparing for? Because every once in a while, I feel like when we're actually approaching something we want or we chose to approach, we forget how small it is to the world, but how big it is to us. And I think we kind of like lose our transaction between our reality and the world. And I think that kind of like it's supposed to flush out our insecurities. It's supposed to flush out everything. But the more time you kind of like engage with it, and the more time you're actually driving towards this form of expression, which is your life's creative essence, I guess. You really are not that you really kind of like form an alliance with yourself, even though you kind of like dispute a lot, but you no longer are alone. And that, like right now, I'm feeling emotional, but that was super fucking intense and it was beautiful. And I fucking wrote a note. Imagine, like, I was actually like seeing myself kind of like become more and more and more like cluttered. And then I'm not the one who said anything. It was just literally like, what do you think I'm preparing for? Just because of how strongly I believe in what I want to do and how just determined I am. Like, if I'm going to die, let's die for something that I want to do. And that's a video. Peace, guys.